see where a lot of Venezuelan natives were happy and they cheered the effort. So there's going to be a mix, I'm sure, with Nicolas Maduro and his wife shipped to New York to face drug and weapons charges. Venezuela's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, declared that the hour of freedom has arrived. Not really sure what she meant on that, but as I mentioned, President Maduro and his wife are now in the United States in New York. So here are a couple of comments. Control Shift says, totally what you expect from a FIFA Peace Prize winner. Next, Anna says, this is crazy to another level. Then we have Wendell, who says, Brazilian guy here. Let me give my perspective on the facts. Let me see what Wendell says. Just a fool would believe it has been a military operation carried out without knowledge of the top brass Venezuelan military. The United States cut off electricity. That's another thing a lot of people were speaking about, the quote unquote blackout. Flew dozens of helicopters and bombed strategic locals with no civilian or military casualties. That's a good thing. The entire operation was conducted in lockstep with the high command of Venezuelan army, which betrayed Maduro. Now that's a different perspective. Your thoughts on that? The Venezuelan army, according to Wendell from Brazil, says the army betrayed Maduro and had already hammered a deal. It's truncated, so let me open it up with the United States because they, in fact, have the control over the resources of the country, especially, and the word I was looking for, if no one has put it in the chat yet, oil fields. And let me grab a couple more. Riza says, Trump admitted Venezuela invasion is to jack oil. Not sure how accurate that statement is. And Brandon says, totally makes sense having the largest, here we go with that word again, oil reserves in the world and risking drug running. So, your thoughts right now as it relates to this breaking news. Now we're going to go to some audio, and it is courtesy of ABC News, where President Trump confirms the United States strike on Venezuela. Again, fair use and greetings. Welcome to those that are here. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. If you are a returning viewer, good to see you virtually. Get comfortable. This is going to be quite a while. This again is courtesy of ABC News.
This is an ABC News special.
Good morning. I'm Allison Cossack, and we're coming on the air this morning to tell you that President Trump has confirmed that strikes on Venezuela have been happening over the past few hours. And according to President Trump, that Nicolas Maduro and his wife have been captured in Venezuela. There have been scenes of multiple explosions and low-flying aircraft. All of that heard beginning around 2 a.m. local time in the capital city of Caracas. Over what's being called ongoing military activity. This comes after weeks of the U.S. ramping up pressure on the government of President Nicolas Maduro, including seizing 2 oil tankers and conducting deadly military strikes on alleged drug boat smugglers. This week,
Now, most of you that have been following this story, you've heard of narco-terrorist or narco-terrorism. This is part of the outline of this entire incident that happened. So again, we're listening to audio from ABC News where Trump confirms the United States strike on Venezuela and confirmed that Maduro and his wife were, quote unquote, captured. Let's continue and welcome.
the Pentagon released video of 2 vessels being hit, saying they were moving along known narco trafficking routes and engaging in narco.
So again, you hear what I just stated, narco terrorists. And this mission, or these missions have been going on for quite some time now. We've heard many stories. So let's continue. And again, welcome.
Trafficking. At least 115 people have been killed in more than 30 strikes since September.
So according to the reporter here at ABC News, she's saying that there have been over 100 casualties as it relates to the strikes and this mission by the United States. And a lot of people consider this is controversial. But let's continue.
The U.S. also deploying a large-scale buildup of military forces and assets in the Caribbean, sending the largest, most advanced aircraft carrier in the world, the USS Gerald Ford. It's now part of the 15,000 U.S. troops that are operating in that region. That's in addition to the joint training exercises in Trinidad and Tobago, just 7 miles away from Venezuela. The U.S. is reportedly installing a radar system on that island. In recent weeks, President Trump declaring that Venezuelan airspace should be considered closed in its entirety. Venezuela authorities denouncing that as a colonialist threat that seeks to affect the sovereignty of its airspace. The FAA warned major airlines about a potentially hazardous situation in the skies over Venezuela, citing worsening security and heightened military activity that could threaten aircraft at all altitudes. That prompted 6 international carriers to suspend flights to the capital city of Caracas. And the U.S. recently added Maduro and its government to the State Department's list of the world's most dangerous terrorist acts.
So, Maduro and wife were on the list of the most dangerous. So I'm sure he wasn't too happy with that. But as I mentioned, there are a lot of people that were protesting today in Washington, D.C. that felt differently. So let's continue to listen to this audio for those of you who want to view the entire video. It can be found again on ABC News. The title is Trump Confirms U.S. Strike on Venezuela, says Maduro and wife captured. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please remember to thumbs up this video if you would be so kind, and I know that you are.
It wasn't President Maduro, but we did get a message that was sent out to the media by remaining members, apparently, of the Maduro government. One man does not make a government, obviously, and so just because President Maduro is out doesn't mean that other members of his government are not still there. But what is their governing capacity? What authority does the civilian population bestow on these people? And quite frankly, what does the United States allow to happen here? I think there's no question that the United States will have a hand in who is the next person to lead Venezuela. If you look at the results of the last.
So, you hear the report is stating that the United States will definitely have a hand in who will be the next as it relates to leadership there in Venezuela. However, at present, our president, Donald Trump, has stated that they will run Venezuela until the latter occurs. Let's continue.
Election in that country, which was widely considered to be a fraudulent election that Maduro lost by a 3-1 margin.
Now, I don't mean to laugh, and I'm going to rewind this just a little bit. Pardon me.
So there, what is their governing capacity? What authority does the civilian population bestow on these people? And quite frankly, what does the United States allow to happen here? I think there's no question that the United States will have a hand in who is the next person to lead Venezuela. If you look at the results of the last election in that country, which was widely considered to be a fraudulent election that Maduro lost by a 3-1 margin.
Okay, I'm going to do a hard stop because that election and who wins elections. Now, I'm not going to start anything, but I'm just going to share with you my expression as I just heard that. Let's continue.
There was an opposition candidate. Is that something that could happen? Could you see a democratic transition to an opposition? Sure, in theory, but you also have members of a vast security state in Venezuela, from the military on down to state level security, on down to community level security, that were collecting government paychecks from the Maduro government. So do they recognize a new democratic transition? These are all the kinds of questions that we simply do not have the answers to yet, given that this is just the right questions to be asking, but there's certainly no way we're going to have these answers as we continue to just sift through this information about what happened here in what has just been a stunning, just a few hours of news as this has come in, has completely upended the entire geopolitical landscape in one of the most...
So, your thoughts thus far on the operation that apparently included a blackout and the capturing of President Maduro and his wife and bringing them to the United States, to New York, on charges. We're going to go to another audio. And again, welcome and thank you all who took time out to stop by and those who may stay for the entirety. Blessings to you. Please make sure you double tap and we will return momentarily.
I know you lying. 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 I know you lying.
Okay, we're going to go to a little bit of audio and video. And this is courtesy of Witness. Again, courtesy of Witness. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And again, happy Saturday, perhaps Sunday, happy weekend, happy New Year.
El mayor exportador.
Again, we keep hearing about oil, and this is just a little context as it relates to Venezuela.
When I was in Venezuela for the first time, I could sit in my apartment building and watch the oil tankers coming in and out. Venezuela produced 3 million barrels of oil a day. It was a tremendous money-making operation.
Money-making operation. Money-making operation. So what's being said right now is Caracas was a big, thriving city.
Las favelas.
But next to them was a large number of very poor areas.
Las zonas pobres de nuestro país.
Again, this is just some context on Venezuela.
Y saben otra cosa. Bastantes cojones.
And I'm going to read what is being said. You know what? We've got balls. I guess it doesn't matter what language you speak. Some of the things that are said are definitely universal. If you don't believe me, you can look at the bottom of the screen. Hopefully you can see it. Let's continue.
After an aborted coup attempt, Hugo Chavez won the presidential election in 1998 and launched his socialist revolution. In the shadows beside his spotlight stood his future right-hand man, Nicolas Maduro.
Le chavisme, c'est la justice sociale. Hugo Chavez, lorsqu'il accède aux responsabilités.
When Hugo Chavez came to power, his main goal was to reduce the social divide in Venezuela.
A comme premier objectif de réduire la fracture sociale au Venezuela, qui est une fracture.
Which is a divide very strongly linked to the fact that it's what? An oil country. So there has been a lot of references to oil, and I'm just 28 minutes in.
Très forte, liée au fait que c'est un pays pétrolier qui a accumulé de très grandes richesses, mais qui les a mal réparties.
That has accumulated great wealth, but has distributed it badly.
Chavez wanted to transform the country, and he was counting on oil to fund his ambitious social projects. He installed one of his close associates at the top of the oil industry. Rafael Ramirez would become one of the most powerful people in the country.
Si bien el petróleo fue durante muchos años.
Oil was an instrument of domination. I'm going to read that again. Oil, and we've heard this so many times, was an instrument of domination.
Un instrumento para la dominación. Ahora con
But thanks to Bolivarian Revolution, it has become an instrument of liberation for our people.
la revolución bolivariana, el petróleo se ha convertido en un instrumento de liberación de nuestro pueblo. Independencia
To independence and the socialist fatherland.
y paz.
We brought the poverty rate down from 70 to 7%. Again, we brought the poverty rate down from 70 to 7%.
7%, la pobreza crítica, que estuvo siempre cercana al 70%.
These are incredible social advances.
Fueron avances sociales muy importantes.
Hugo Chavez turned global politics upside down. Nicolas Maduro became his Minister of Foreign Affairs, orchestrating close relationships with Cuba, Putin's Russia, and Iran.
So this gets really deep into the history and politics of Venezuela. Now this is 51 minutes long. Absolutely, I'm not going through the entire thing. You can find this on Mission. Again, we're just getting some context.
Yo conocía a Nicolás Maduro como oficial de seguridad.
I knew Nicolas Maduro when I was a young officer in Hugo Chávez's security detail.
Del anillo de seguridad de Hugo Chávez, del primer anillo. Nicolás Maduro estaba.
At that time, Nicolas Maduro was elected as a member of the National Assembly. So now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of Nicolas Maduro.
Como diputado a la Asamblea Nacional, después él fue presidente de la.
He became president of the Assembly, and finally he was appointed as Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Asamblea Nacional, y después lo nombraron canciller. Era como un.
And this is General Figueroa. For Chavez, he was his errand boy.
Muchacho de hacer mandados de Hugo Chávez.
But Hugo Chávez's health was failing. His illness pushed him to name a successor.
Buenas noches, Venezuela. Buenas noches a todo el pueblo venezolano.
Around the table, he assembled his closest disciples. Next to Chavez and Maduro was Oil Minister Rafael Ramirez.
Again, another reference to oil.
Ustedes elijan.
And Chavez is saying, elect Nicolas Maduro to the presidency of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Nicolás Maduro como presidente de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela.
I ask you from the bottom of my heart. So, let's advance a little bit. And we'll continue. And he doesn't need any introduction, but of course I'm going to. That was Donald Trump.
More than 60 countries would follow America's lead in recognizing Juan Guaido. The White House had found their man to topple Maduro.
Maduro's grip on tyranny will be smashed and broken.
Donald Trump says his grip would be smashed and broken. So I guess the seize, the capture of Maduro and his wife was that smash. Operation Freedom.
In Caracas, the smell of regime change was in the air. The night of 30th April, the telephone rang in the White House. Operation Freedom had begun.
I
That's the
recall
White
that I
House.
spoke with Trump about 5 o'clock. Obviously, he was asleep. One of the key actors that the opposition had been dealing with was General Figueroa.
And that's the gentleman that you heard speaking earlier.
Guaido.
Yo me llevé a presidente del Tribunal Supremo de.
I picked up the president of the Supreme Court, Michael Moreno, in my car.
Justicia en Venezuela. Michael Moreno lo monté en mi carro y me fui manejando.
We went to the house of Minister of Defense, General Padrino.
Para allá, para casa de Padrino. Y
They were both very nervous.
que Moreno estaba muy nervioso porque a lo mejor ellos sabía cada quien por separado que estaban involucrados.
They each knew that the other was involved separately in the coup, but they haven't yet met.
No, pero no se habían visto.
La cooperación con un militar puede costarle la vida a un militar. Cárcel, tortura.
Si yo los llevé, mira, véanse a la cara y díganse lo que tengo que decir porque esto no tiene marcha.
I said to them, look each other in the eyes because there's no going back now. So I'm going to advance this. Oil and oil reserves. We're going to stop this right here and take a short break, and we'll return. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and please be sure to hit the screen. Just tap it lightly, or depending upon the device you're using, please give this a thumbs up. Comments, again, are absolutely welcome. I just ask that you are respectful. Again, thank you so much, and welcome to President Trump Says We Will Run Venezuela. I'm your hostess, Lise.
I know you lying. 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 I know.
Okay, that was actual audio from the channel Witness. Very good video, actually, for those of you that are interested. Very, very good video. And we're going to now listen to a little bit of audio from one of my favorite channels. And it is called The Midas Touch. And the title of this audio, or video rather, is Trump Faces Instant Backlash After Unlawful War. Your thoughts if you feel as though this was actually unlawful. And this is The Midas Touch.
Venezuela. We're now hearing from the acting president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, addressing the nation and stating, quote, Venezuela will never be a colony of any nation, adding that Venezuela will only ever have one president, Nicolas Maduro. I mean, she seems to be digging in her heels. We'll have to see what happens there. The interior minister as well, who's kind of known as the main henchman, has been videotaped, saying that like there's no plan to surrender to Donald Trump at this point. The governors of Maduro seem defiant, but that could be changing rapidly. One of the things that I think went little reported, but that Donald Trump said during that press conference and also told the New York Post, he said, many Cubans lost their lives last night. Did you know that? Many Cubans lost their lives. They were protecting Maduro. That was not a good move. Maduro was being guarded by a contingent of Cuban soldiers, Tom.
So he's saying that a lot of Cubans were casualties. So before we continue with the audio, again, this is courtesy of the Midas Touch. I'm going to capture some comments if I'm able. And Don says, the Supreme Court has a huge hand in this mess, giving Trump immunity from illegal actions. Stephanie says the oil doesn't belong to the United States. It belongs to the Venezuelan people. And those of you that have lived long enough, we've heard so many stories about it's about oil, it's about oil, many controversies, many conflicts. The end game has been oil. Bardot says, funny how a dictator says he has a problem with the Venezuelan government because it's a dictatorship. Next, PDFs have been known to create elaborate diversion tactics. Marx says we need to arrest Trump and hand him over to the International Court. Next, Diesel says a drunk and a felon. I did not say this. Diesel said this. You can look at the Midas touch. A drunk and a felon run in the military. What could possibly go wrong? So let's continue. Again, this is the Midas touch.
This man Lynn says it appears that those Cuban soldiers were killed. We're trying to get more information about Venezuelan military deaths. Seems like there was over a dozen at least, perhaps more than 90 injured. In terms of some other potential diplomatic.
That's a lot. So we're going to advance with the actual conversation with Representative Ryan, who's responded to Trump's speech on the attack on Venezuela.
Reaction to what took place, and then let's talk about some other stuff about this. So what's your reaction to what just took place?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for covering this. And I think you mentioned it in my bio, somebody that served 27 months in combat. This is not a good day for our country. Americans are now, we got to be very clear and strong about this. This does not make the American people safer. It does not make America stronger. It certainly tarnishes our reputation. And for those of
you in the chat who may catch the replay, do you feel that this move, this target, this strike has made the United States vulnerable, or has it made us stronger? Your thoughts and opinions. And thank you for the engagement.
of us that served in Iraq and Afghanistan in particular, on a personal level, this is us clearly starting another forever war, which the American people do not support. It's very clear this is not about drugs. Trump, the press conference was stunning in just straight up admitting this is a war for oil, and he is willing to send our blood and treasure, our tax dollars, and our precious young men and women to, quote, run Venezuela, whatever the hell that means.
Again, that's the title of this broadcast. We will run Venezuela, of course, until they decide how they're going to get new leadership in and when that will happen. Let's continue. This is courtesy of the Midas Touch. And the title of the video is Trump faces instant backlash after unlawful war. Again, key here is unlawful. Was this unlawful? There are many people that are stating that Congress needs to be involved. Were they told? There's a clip I need to find where a reporter asked Donald Trump that, and he referred the question to Marco Rubio. I thought that was hilarious, but that's just me.
With no plan, clearly, no coordination, as you just talked about, with any of the legitimate or illegitimate leaders on the ground there. So this is a really dark day for our country. And I think anybody that loves this country and the values we stand for has to be outraged. I mean, I am out.
Now, there are many who are outraged, but as I said at the top of the broadcast, there are many who are actually celebrating this. So let's continue.
Right now, I was watching this press conference with my two young boys who are 4 and 6, and I had to hold back my rage as my 6-year-old asked me, why are we bombing another country? And that's just, it's also, by the way, it's the opposite of what Donald Trump ran on, blatantly.
And when I was covering this live, just instinctually, I said this out loud. I said, what I'm feeling right now is what it must feel like to be someone living in Russia who opposes what Putin's doing, but is stuck in that situation because you have Donald Trump basically calling this a special operation, saying that Venezuela stole our oil, and so we need to take back our oil. I mean, it's very Putin-esque language right there. And then Marco Rubio saying we don't need congressional authorization at all because this actually wasn't a military operation.
So that's where the gray line is, the blurred lines are. Marco Rubio, and that's where the clip I need to find, so that they didn't need the stamp from Congress because it wasn't. I'm sounding like Dr. Umar Johnson now, a military operation. So let's continue.
While Donald Trump was saying, we're going to run the country, Rubio says this was actually just a legal operation where...
Okay, so what's the difference between a military operation versus a legal operation? Again, there are a lot of nuances here. Let's continue.
It'd be no different if you were trying to catch a fugitive in Miami. We're just catching a fugitive who happens to be the president. So that's what this was really about. Also, as Pam Bondi is not standing there as well at the press conference. So it just felt very Putin-esque in watching it. And I'm like, unrecognizable what our country is under this Trump regime.
Okay, so again, this is courtesy of the Midas Touch. And you can find it on the Midas Touch channel. Title is Trump Faces Instant Backlash After Unlawful War. So let's look at a couple of slides here. Ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife arrived at Stewart Air National Guard Base just north of New York City this afternoon, hours after their capture during a daring United States military operations in Caracas. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, were captured overnight in their home in Caracas. They were transported to the USS Iwo Jima warship before being flown to New York to face criminal charges. The couple could be arraigned as soon as Monday. Just a couple of days. Two sources familiar with the matter told CBS News. Expressions of unbridled power don't become blunter than abducting. Again, there are people that are coining this as being an abduction, rather being captured. A sitting president from his capital in the dead of the night, President Donald Trump, shown in a 74-word social media post that he can act decisively, suddenly, and perhaps recklessly in pursuit of his varied and varying foreign policy goals with little regard for precedent, consequence, or, it seems, international law. And the operation to take Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife from their heavily guarded location, that's key as well, heavily guarded location in Caracas to presumably face the American court system, does follow a predictable, albeit extreme pattern for what the U.S. calls a fugitive with a $50 million bounty. A $50 million bounty. Your thoughts and opinions as we go on a quick break and return for another quick video. Again, welcome to those that are just joining, and I'm glad you're here.
I know you lying. 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 I know
And we are back, and we're going back over this breaking news as the president of Venezuela was captured and his wife as well brought to the United States, New York, to face charges. And so much is being talked about. So we're going to the next audio, and this is courtesy of Pondering Politics. Again, Pondering Politics, and the title is Stunning. Venezuela Humiliates Trump on Live TV. Let's continue with the audio. Again, this is fair use. Those of you that are just coming in, greetings and welcome.
The Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, has just appeared on camera for the first time and said she's in charge, flanked by military officials and other power brokers in Venezuela, calling Maduro's capture a kidnapping, demanding his immediate release, and saying that Venezuela will not be a colony of the United States. A defiant move, given that Trump has said his team's running the country and that she's doing everything they want.
We have it.
So again, that's just the title of this broadcast. Trump says we are going to run this until they get the leadership and all that entails in place. So let's continue.
From using military intervention again, potentially even invading and occupying Venezuela with American soldiers, American boots on the ground. The odds of that have radically increased. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells.
Again, this is courtesy of Pondering Politics.
All right, folks, to unpack this, I got to start with reminding you about what Trump said just a few hours ago about Venezuela's interim leader.
We're going to back Machado to come back and be the opposition leader in your Fox and Friends interview. And then you also mentioned the vice president of Venezuela. Are you going to work with vice president of Venezuela, or how do you foresee the relationship
Well, I
going?
understand she was just sworn in, but she was, as you know, picked by Maduro. So Marco's working on that directly. Just had a conversation with her, and she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
Did he just say make Venezuela great again?
We think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
We're going to back Machado.
So he says whatever we think is necessary, she's just going to do what she's told. And then he doubled down on it later in the same press conference, and he used even more degrading language to describe the nature of their dynamic.
Are you saying that Secretary Hegseth and Rubio are going to be running Venezuela, and will you be sending in U.S. military
There's
troops
gonna
to
be a team
provide?
that's working with the people of Venezuela.
I'm going to let you see Marco Rubio's face. Let's see if I can get this really quickly. This is Marco Rubio.
To make sure that we have Venezuela right. Because for us to just leave, who's going to take over? I mean, there is nobody to take over. You have a vice president who's been appointed by Maduro. And right now she's the vice president, and she's, I guess, the president. She was sworn in as president.
So I just wanted you to see quickly Marco Rubio's face. Yeah, and let's continue to listen to President Trump.
Just a little while ago, she had a long conversation with Marco, and she said, "We'll do whatever you need." I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice. We're going to have this done right. We're not going to just do this with Maduro, then leave like everybody else, leave and say, let it go to hell.
So he says she doesn't have a choice, and again insists that she'll just serve as a puppet and do whatever she is told. Then, of course, the other shoe dropped, right? So as OSINT and Spectator has reported on Twitter, it's been corroborated by multiple sources. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez addresses the nation, calls for Nicolas Maduro's release, and says the country will never be a colony of any.
So that might be a shocker to some. She's called for the release of Nicolas Maduro.
Nation, according to Reuters. All right. And so with that in mind, I want to play you this clip, which goes into a bit more detail, and we'll look.
Again, this is courtesy of Pondering Politics.
Some additional reporting.
Coverage and developments are moving very quickly at this moment out of Venezuela. The vice president there just speaking out and taking control, thumbing the nose at President Trump after he announced the capture of President Nicolas Maduro by U.S. military forces overnight, posting this image of Maduro on the USS Iwo Jima. The Venezuelan leader and his wife are now on their way back to New York to face drug and weapons charges in a U.S. court, apparently in the Southern District of New York. Now, Trump in his press conference, it was an hour long. We really didn't get any details on who will lead the country other than that he said it was the group behind him, which was his inner circle, including Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, that a U.S. team would be running it. But now, as I said, the big development this moment is that the vice president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, has just appeared on camera for the first time and said she's in charge, flanked by military officials and other power brokers in Venezuela, calling Maduro's capture a kidnapping, demanding his immediate release, and saying that Venezuela.
So your thoughts on that? Do you feel as though this was a kidnapping or a strategically planned legal operation or perhaps a military operation? Let's continue to listen. Again, this is Pondering Politics.
Going to stand up for her interests, her regime's interests, and what she perceives as the Venezuela's interests. Now, on the one hand, what else is she going to say, right? She's not going to say, oh, it's great that the U.S. attacked. But on the other hand, it seems like this is the very beginning not only of what's going to be surely a messy period in Venezuelan politics and society, but also a very complicated negotiation going forward.
Indeed. And again, remember that Trump made it explicitly clear that he was planning on this to be a long-term nation-building process. He said he was going to involve American oil companies. He said that he had the military deployed. They were prepared to do second, third waves, that he was not averse to putting boots on the ground, American boots on the ground, to invade and occupy Venezuela. And
okay, so if you want to continue to listen to the entire video, that is stunning. Venezuela humiliates Trump on live TV. And again, that's courtesy of Pondering Politics. This next audio is from Katie Curic, entitled Maduro Captured, United States Strikes Venezuela. Let's continue.
Significant players. And Maduro's predecessor, Hugo Chavez.
And you saw that.
Undid democracy.
And that's why.
The foreign oil companies, the American oil companies left. And I can't remember how.
And that's why I did the context that I did earlier, so you could get an understanding of Venezuela and the oil and what seems to be, as I said, the blueprint of all of this. So let's continue. Again, courtesy of Katie Curic.
How many millions of barrels a day they were producing? They almost never ask for formal declarations of war. That seems to be something that's in the Constitution, but not in practice. And even under the War Powers Act, what it requires is that you notify Congress after you've done something. So one of the criticisms.
So that is a direct opposite, a direct contrast of what Marco Rubio said, that because this was a legal operation that they did not need to notify Congress prior to. So there's a lot of talk about that area right there. So let's continue. And your thoughts on that? Did Congress need to be alerted as to what was happening?
War Powers Act, when it came about in the early 70s, is that it seemed to provide a legitimate route for acting first and notifying second. You know, the question of whether the president had the authority, clearly Venezuela didn't constitute an imminent threat. The drug issue seems to be more of a law enforcement issue. Look, when I worked in the State Department, you know, the legal advisor.
Your thoughts on that? Let's continue.
Wasn't setting policy. He was somebody you talked to, and all that.
But isn't this beyond the pale? I mean, yes, there have been instances where the War Powers Act has been ignored. But let me read you this excerpt from something in the Atlantic, Trump's risky war in Venezuela. It says, after Pearl Harbor, FDR addressed Congress and asked it to declare war on Japan prior to the war power in Congress.
Yeah, but again, and this has been debate. You go back to Arthur Schlesinger Jr., the imperial presidency. Presidents, Republican and Democrat alike, have regularly used military force without bringing Congress involved. Now, there's a question of legality, which you're getting at. There's also just a question of political smarts. Often I would argue, it's smart to get Congress involved because in case the operation proves particularly costly, you're going to wish you had Congress on board.
So we're going to stop right there. That is part one. Part one, ladies and gentlemen, of the breaking news of the strike in Venezuela, where President Maduro and his wife were captured, brought to the United States and to New York to face charges. Your thoughts and opinions. This is part one, and we'll be back later with part two. Thank you so much for tuning in to another evening edition of Lease. And this is Trump says we will run Venezuela. I guess Maduro thought he could run for a little bit, but he couldn't hide. So again, thank you to everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. Please be safe, be well, and be healthier. Until next time, bye-bye for now.